It's not a hardware company or a software company anymore. Like, the equipment guys were that, and then there was tech companies. Like, the equipment must have tech and must be integrated into tech, going after these niche audiences, speaking directly to them. So instead of saying you should do strength training, which is good for everybody, it's like if you're on GLP-1s, then it's good for you. If you're going through menopause, it's good for you, right? Like, and going to those audiences, as opposed to just saying strength training is good, which it is good for everybody, but talking about the thing they're going through. I think speaking to those audiences definitely having an impact in getting people to sign up that wouldn't otherwise be interested in strength training, for instance, in the case of menopause.
Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host, Mo Iqbal. Mo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Over here in Virginia, which is the state in the US for a lot of our international audiences, which most people probably know. It's actually off topic, but it's a great point on when you travel internationally, how well states are recognized. Because if we ask myself or our guests here in a second, we could barely name the Canadian provinces. I mean, I think I could name like the Yucatan in Mexico as a state in Mexico, but generally we don't know states in other countries. But when you travel internationally, and I'm like, I'm from the DC area, but technically it's Virginia. It's like, oh, we know Virginia. I'm like, oh, okay. Um, but school starts this week. So one interesting thing here in the US is I don't know about other countries, but it's a bit of a, for whatever reason, a tiered or different system. So where I grew up in New Jersey, Lauren grew up in Long Island, who's our guest here.
Yep.
We always started school the day after Labor Day, which is perfect because Labor Day, which is next weekend, is the end of the summer, the last long weekend. You kind of get your mind right. And you're like, okay, summer's over, school's going to start. It's great for the kids, even better for the parents. But here, so I moved down to Virginia. I've been here about 10 years. They always start school like the week before Labor Day. In some cases, 2 weeks before. It's the absolute worst. So, anyways, my two young girls. So my son started his school last week on a Thursday, which is also weird. And my two young girls start their school tomorrow. It's the first day of school. So um that's what's been new in my world. I'm excited to get I love having the kids home, but also excited to get them off to school. And for this episode, we've got a special guest. And Lauren Foundos, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to do a quick intro for you. This is a bit of a last minute change. So you kind of came on last minute. So we appreciate that. Want to get you on anyways, because you are the founder, and I'm going to say this, the former CEO of Forte,
Yep.
one of the earliest innovators in streaming fitness for gyms and studios. Before starting Forte, you spent nearly a decade on Wall Street, and I believe as a bond trader, if my
Yep.
memory serves correctly. And then you kind of made the leap into entrepreneurship. Under your leadership, Forte has partnered with some of the top gyms and boutique studios to bring digital to brick and mortar experiences and really innovated in a lot of areas. And this year in 2025, Forte was acquired by Echelon Fitness, a global leader in connected hardware and content. Lauren has been recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 female founders. Lauren's been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. And today she continues to shape the digital future of fitness inside of Echelon in a leadership capacity. Lauren, welcome to Lifts.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. You guys are great friends and also great leaders in this space. So excited to sit down and talk today.
What got you into from bond trading into fitness? So was it more of a passion? You made all your money in bond trading and decided to do something you was passionate about, or
No, because she
what
wanted
was
to lose
that?
all of it. She came into fitness.
A little bit of that. It is quite lucrative. So if anyone is looking for money, that's a great industry. I would say I was an athlete growing up, and bond trading I thought was going to kill me. I was going to work very early, staying out very late at night. And I started to lose my sense of self. I got really back into working out, back into studios. Were at the peak of their game at that point. And so I started to take my customers to work out with me as a means to not having to drink and go to steak dinners every night, and got really immersed in the space and started to try to invest in the space. And then started to notice like where I thought holes or lack of innovation was, became really fixated on it, and decided to quit my lucrative job after buying this 3-floor loft to just, start a startup and go in that venture. So I was really determined to make it work. And it's been an exciting ride. Obviously the industry has innovated so much. I think the pandemic fast tracked a lot of that. So it's been a wild ride to for the last 10 years for sure.
You've been a part of, we've been through cycles, just even in the last 5 or 7 years. So you were part of that cycle of getting physical locations to transform to digital and really look at that as a revenue stream. In fact, some of your brands even have digital eclipsing physical from a
Yep.
revenue perspective. You were also part of the wind up during the pandemic in getting high valuations, getting the funding coming in. You did a great job in raising capital.
Yep.
You also had learning lessons in building technology the wrong way, then rebuilding it the right way. And then you were also part of the the challenges post pandemic for digital, as a lot of the investment went to physical studios, um, raising capital at those, you during pandemic valuations. Not just you, but this is for everyone, including big companies like Peloton and iFit and others. And then you kind of had to come to a point where you say, you know what, I think we now need to partner with a bigger company. That's when you and I worked together. We had many conversations. I've been an advisor for Forte, and if memory serves me correctly, Lauren, I think it was right after Thanksgiving when
Yep.
we said, let's go ahead and kick off this process. And I'm so glad with where you ended up. I think you've got a tremendous partner in Echelon. You've got a great founding team there. I think it's the perfect home for Forte. But why don't you tell the audience, now that you are part of Echelon, speak a bit about the strategy behind what this combined entity is going to look like?
I think you touched on a couple of key points. So when we initially built Forte, we were selling to a market where almost nobody used digital, right? They didn't have it. So we were selling them something they weren't even necessarily ready for. The consumers were starting to adopt some innovation. And so it's been an interesting ride because, to your point, I was selling them something they weren't even trying to buy. Then their pandemic happened, so people were forced to buy it, which obviously, there was that time. But my whole thesis was that we're never just going to be working at home, that the consumer is going to be doing all these things because I'm a user of the space and that's what I was doing. And so, to be honest, that vortex of the pandemic where the valuations were high and the connected companies were doing so well was interesting to me because we're never just going to be one or the other. I always had this thesis. And now I think we're getting to the point where we're trying to figure out, like, okay, the innovation and how do we adopt technology? How do we engage our customer more? And I think people are really, gyms, consumers, everybody is sort of now in the same place. And then also, how do we price these things into, the ecosystems that exist? And I think that's something that I think about a lot now. During the pandemic, things were being given away because the gyms were closed. And so I don't know that strategy is the best one as we move forward in today's world. So
Where did they come
from Forte's
You,
perspective, that's been
you
quite a
break that
journey.
down into sort of
Seeing
different
this whole
age
evolution.
groups
And I
and women
think
with
now
children,
with
women
being
without
acquired
children.
by
Like, there's so
Echelon
many
and Forte is
different
now rebranded as
demographics
Elevate
and
within
people
the
at
within the
so many
Echelon
different stages of
ecosystem.
life
I think
that
what's
would
so exciting
be
to me is it
interested in
gives me a lot
personal
of the
training.
tools
I
that I
think that's
didn't
the
have
challenge.
before.
And
So
I think
sometimes
you're
people
probably
would
going to
say,
get
can we
more of
use a
these
studio to
specialized
film
companies that
content?
are
And where
going to do a
Echelon
really
has
good job,
multiple
and they're probably
studios in
going to
the
be able
US
to charge a
and
much higher
Dubai. So
price
brands can come in
because
and film
they really
content
sort of niche
branded
down on
with
a
their
particular
trainers.
demographic.
There's so
That's
many
kind of
different
my view on
opportunities
the
like that.
situation. But
They
I
can
think
also
what
have
Crunch has
content
done
go out to
is a
the
great
greater
idea,
Echelon
and
ecosystem as well as
certainly
within their own
got a
app.
lot of
And a
respect
brand can have
for the
their own
campaign that
connected
they've
performer,
put
her
forward.
bike, or all those things with content. So now I have all these different tools to create a really big ecosystem. And Echelon is now also focused on going B2B on the commercial side. They have a lot of products. I think a lot of people, when I start calls, they say, oh, I thought you just had a bike. And I'm like, well, let me tell you what's going on over here now at Echelon. So they make a whole commercial line of connected equipment, as well as software that integrates with all equipment within the gym. So I think it is a great home for Forte. Lou, the CEO and founder, is a serial entrepreneur, super innovative. We're not going to sit and wait and watch things happen and then decide to do them. We're going to be chasing them and ahead of all the trends. And so I think there's a big opportunity for us to really help a brand that wants to digitize their entire experience from the equipment all the way to the app that they build end to end. And I think that we're the guy that's going to be able to do that. And it's not a hardware company or a software company anymore. Like, the equipment guys were that. And then there was tech companies. Like, the equipment must have tech and must be integrated into tech. And so I think that's why, Echelon's poised really well to do that.
Lauren, Mo gave a bit of a summary of some of the changes that have happened within the industry since the pandemic, and I think we've seen a number of operators and business owners dive into different hot topic. So, for example, coming out or even in the middle of the pandemic, everybody suddenly thought they wanted to create their own app, and they started to develop their own content, and quite quickly people realized that it was a huge investment, and in most cases those apps weren't really working. And there's probably, even if you look at some of the bigger brands that just had fitness apps, even those I think now are struggling to find their way in a very competitive market. Then we saw a lot of gyms or fitness facilities looking at digital content that would go into a room or a gym where people would go in there and they would follow the screen and they would do a workout, whether it's group exercise or whether it's like group cycling. And there's a number of brands that entered in that space, made some big bets and some big investments. And when I go around to many gyms, again, I sort of see some of those struggling to get their, to fill out the classes probably as they'd expected. And I think if you had to maybe provide your own overview of probably some of the things that have not worked and are lessons that you've got, but some of the areas now today in 2025 where you're seeing that these digital content solutions are really starting to be successful. And so if you could provide that sort of overview of both sides of the coin, I think that would be sort of helpful to sort of understand where the market is today.
Yeah, we should definitely do it.
Totally. Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the head. I think obviously there's digital content that could be consumed at home, at the gym, and then within a group. I think when you go to the gym, you see people following things on their phones. And so how do you create that experience so they can not be on their phone and following it on a larger screen, and have the fact that there's other people there that are also doing something similar, and so they can do it together and have a better workout. And so I think there's a studio that I like to go to, and I think we're seeing that gyms have tried this before, but I think we're finding the right way to execute this is basically every gym has areas that are underutilized and people are following programming. So having videos on the screen where a class is going to start every 10 minutes, every half hour, that people can hop into and follow a circuit. One of the studios that I like to go to, Sweat 440, I think they've done a really great job. Even though there's no coach, it's the place that I actually know the most people because our names are up on the screen. I know I'm starting with Mo and Matthew. So, I've been going to Barry's and other gyms for ages, and I don't know the people in the class's names. So even though they're using technology, it's the place I feel the closest to the community. And so I think there's ways to help get the people together, enhance the experience that they're doing, utilizing equipment that's in the gym that they would never otherwise have in their house, like a battle rope or a sled, and make it an experience using digital that makes them want to go to the gym. So I think we're seeing a lot of that evolution. Obviously, rising costs. It's hard to get great trainers across brands. And also a lot of brands have, 24-hour access, and just you're not going to have classes 24 hours a day. So making those unused spaces, so there's classes running all the time, I think is something that we're seeing that people are really excited about.
Look, I think content is going to be what creatine is as a supplement right now. So creatine has made a comeback, and follow along here, Matthew. Creatine has made a comeback, right? We talked about this for everything.
So true.
Jet lag, sleep, cognitive thinking, whatever, make all the above. I mean, just do us a favor and take more creatine.
Yeah.
Although I did hear that it can make your hair fall out, particularly for women. I did see that.
I'm okay. I'm okay in that department. But let's for those of you who are watching us on video, if you don't already know us, content is truly underutilized, and I think a lot of gyms were able to continue on and be okay because of this, and we didn't have the data. So here's some really interesting stat that I haven't really mentioned yet because the report's not out yet. But because, one, I'm at ABC Fitness, I do a couple things with Sweatworks, as you all know. We have built some technologies that essentially integrate the equipment with member data. And through that, we could essentially see and track health outcomes, because ultimately we want to be tracking towards health outcomes. And a lot of gyms might not know this. Lauren, you might be aware of this based on what you mentioned. When you tie in either a guided content class, not just a little treadmill indicator, or a little track indicator on your treadmill, but a guided content class of long form content, or where you've got, to your point, a community driven by whether it's a leaderboard or just some sort of two-way video or some sort of content related to a community, you work out and output roughly 15% more in that workout than if you did not. 15%. That is a lot. So imagine if you went to the gym 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and you put in 15% more effort, what would that mean towards all of the health indicators, your VO2 max, your strength, your mobility, all the above, recovery? Content's a key to that. Lauren, you talk about a lot of people going in.
Yep.
30% of gym attendees today are going in with either content on their phone or a program that they've come into the gym with. So if
Yep.
I'm the gym, right, I would ask myself, well, just like we want to capture a bigger share of the wallet, we
Yep.
need to capture a bigger share of their attention and mind share. And the gyms that are going to do this are going to be successful. And I know we were talking yesterday, Lauren. I know we can't talk about specific brands here, but you brought up an example of one of the largest gym chains in the country.
Yep.
It's a top 5 gym chain that's been incredibly successful in simply pairing a complementary app to their core apps. It's not even like an integrated offering, but has roughly earning about $500,000 a month in incremental revenue for essentially doing nothing.
Yep.
That is material. And I guarantee that if they track the retention of those members, that they would also find that those members are better retained. So in an industry where, especially on the HVLP segment, we churn 50% of members a year, those changes and those levers are material, they're meaningful, and I think brands need to action on it.
I think you touched on a couple really great things. I think even just having, if somebody has a trainer at the gym 2 days a week and they don't come to the gym on the weekends, and you know that, you could be programming, and this is what we're doing in this case, which is launching September 1st, which we'll soon be able to talk more about. But programming audio jogs, audio walks, things for them to do on the weekend, 5-minute core mobility, so they're staying healthy, and being able to program things for them to do, whether it's around the gym or at home on the weekends. And I think the people that are not scared to do that are really going to end up the winners here. Echelon has a partnership with AWS where they've been working on AI, where you can talk to the AI and say, like, I'm feeling a little banged up this week, and it will alter the workouts and alter what you're doing. And the utilization rate on this stuff that they can see is 65% higher when the people are engaging with this AI. They can see that on their equipment that they're tracking to their million plus users. So I think using AI to, one, give people a plan and hold them accountable is going to be a game changer. And that may include workouts in the gym, out of the gym, recovery days. Some people may even be going to the gym just to do recovery. A lot of the gyms are now implementing all different recovery things. So I think that's a big time, for people to think about the gym just outside of the workout side as well, now that they're adding recovery areas too.
Probably a question to both of you, actually. I'll be interested in your thoughts. It's clear that, as you said, Mo, content has an impact. And if I can understand that if you're sitting on a Peloton bike and you've got your earphones in and you're dialed into a screen and you've almost got like your own private little area, whether particularly if it's in a commercial setting, how that could improve your outcomes. I can see if you was on a treadmill and again, you was in your own sort of area, you had, it's fairly immersive, you had a big screen, you were following something along, you had your earphones on. I get that. But how does context play into other areas that are probably not machine based? Because we talked about the Sweat 1440, which is a unique experience, where my guess is the way that they curate that whole experience and how you check in and how you sort of use the screen, but you're working out on your own and you almost like feel part of this machine that goes around. That clearly has got something that makes it sticky and makes it as though you would want to look at a screen as well as work out. But are there any sort of things that do's and don'ts when you're coming up with a content strategy in terms of the environment that you're working out in? Does this require you to lay out the facility in a slightly different way? If, for example, you're going to have more of a PT experience where Maybe it's a small screen or an app where you may be doing something like kettlebells or dumbbells. Does that, because I can imagine if that's out on the gym floor and other people can kind of see what you're doing, that's slightly different than sitting on a Peloton bike where you don't feel stupid. But I can imagine some people feeling fairly self-conscious if they're doing these things and that environment isn't conducive to some of the movements they're being asked to do.
I think number one, a quick do's and don'ts. I think the do are two things: quality, quality, quality. Focus on quality content. And number two, simple. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. The simpler you could keep content and be prescriptive around what to do, I think you're going to find more utilization and success. And then to your second point, look, there's a lot of ways to engage people, right? The screen does not need to have music. It could be more, it could be just more directive and providing you what to do and what to do next. Ultimately, what people want is essentially to know what to do. What movements should I do? How much should I do it for? What load should I put on it? That's the important thing. So I think that the application of content outside of cardio equipment is a big boom that is going to happen in the next 5 years. But Lauren, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I think to your first point, I think you're right about programming the content. So having content is one thing, but telling people how and when to use it. Is it for women going through menopause? Is it, like really directing the content to different funnels as opposed to just offering content? So I think that's one important thing is directing it towards new people, towards new members. I think one thing that we're working on at Echelon that I'm super fired up about, and Matthew literally just described the whole business model without knowing it, is one of the things that they're doing is they have a strength IQ line, which is similar to eGym. So obviously those are doing prescriptive workout plans. You're going to do a 1 rep max, and that equipment is smart and connected and the future of equipment. But most gyms don't have that equipment all over the place. So one of the things that we're working on, we call it the workout builder. It maps the gym floor. So that specific gym's location. So it knows where the cardio machines are and the leg press is next to the shoulder press. And it's going to program workouts. You're going to tell it how confident you are at weightlifting. So if you're not confident, it's not going to put you on the tricep machine where people are doing pull-ups in the center of the gym on blast. It's going to start you on the machines in the outskirts until you get more confidence. To your point, Matthew, it's not going to program somebody to take a barbell and do snatches. It's going to put them on machines and safer things until they build their confidence. So it's good for the consumer because it's going to give them a plan. It's going to give them a plan based on gym etiquette and moving things around, and also just how people feel at the level that they're at. And it's also good for the gym because it's going to move people around the facility, get people using equipment that they maybe weren't. And the layered up version of that is that there are sensors on the equipment, which then count the reps and the weight that you're using. So that's one thing. And then it knows that people are on the equipment. So it's also telling Mo to go to one thing and me to go to at another at a different time. And so I think really giving people a plan, having them be able to adjust that plan, I think that's going to honestly lead to more private training. It's going to get people in a cycle where they know what they're doing. And from the studies that we've been doing, it's just increasing engagement and follow through on everything. So I think we're really excited about that. And that's content, but in a different format, right? Short video content.
I really love what Echelon is doing there. And just to be fair, you're not the only ones doing it. eGym,
Yep.
Technogym are also doing it. You're coming
I
in
said eGym when I started the whole sentence.
from a very different perspective. Look, we have a couple of really important stories to cover today. I want to start by this because I think it's a fantastic idea. We've all heard what Planet Fitness has done some really smart marketing campaigns. One of which I love has been, which maybe members don't love as much, but is free gyms for college and high school kids during the summer. Free access to Planet Fitness. It is such a great tool to get people and kids into the gym following healthy habits, but it's a great acquisition tool as well because once they graduate college or they go or after the summer, they're at their local. Once they go back to school, they're going to look for a local Planet Fitness and join Planet Fitness.
Yep.
So I love that. What Crunch Fitness is doing, they just announced this that August 30th, they're going to roll out a full free day of personal training sessions. So it's about, they're calculating it to be 1.6 million in terms of value of personal training sessions across all clubs. So here's why I'm a big fan of personal training. Even though everyone on this call, we were athletes at one point, we all trained and had coaches and all the things. But do you know how many skills I've learned by having a personal trainer? Kettlebells, swimming better, learning new things. I mean, personal trainers have really evolved my fitness and continue to push me. And we know, being in the industry, the reason why we care so much about personal training is because we know that once you're in, even if you have just once a week of a session with personal trainers, you are 2 to 3x more likely to stay as members. But as an industry, we've done a poor job in converting them, right? Unless you look at a premium club like an Equinox or a Lifetime. So as an industry, less than 15% of gym members, and this is not, during their lifetime, would have actually engaged in personal training. And PT can generate 20 to 30% of non-dues revenues for gym. I mean, it could
Yep.
essentially, when you look at some of the margins that these gyms run, it could make or break the gym. So when I look at Crunch, they've got 2.4 million members. They're doing a phenomenal job. Recently got acquired, 430 clubs across the country. So even an uptick in PT by 2% could mean millions of revenue upside for them. And it's also not just about, I think, the PT revenue. It's also about members are going to feel less intimidated. Imagine, if I'm not a member of Crunch, or if I'm a new member of Crunch, I'm taking advantage of that because, number one, I could have a friction to price, or I could
Yep.
be intimidated and not want to try. But this gives you a chance to really go see the value of personal training, which is so undervalued in our industry today. So I think it's key. Matthew and I, back in the UK with Performance Live, we did a whole Lyft live session with Richard Boyd to really unpack the value of personal training. So I love this in terms of what Crunch is doing. Matthew, any thoughts on this?
I think, as you said, everybody knows the value of personal training. It's something that gyms have continued to try and figure out how to get more people doing personal training. I think the percentage of people that are doing it is, as long as I can remember, has always stayed around this sort of 15%, 10 to 20%, and average around about 15%. I know when we've spoken to Dave Minton in the past a number of times, he's always gone on that everybody in the gym should have a free personal trainer, because if they had a personal trainer, they would come back and they would reach their exercise goals. But it seems as though there's not been any significant changes in that space for a long time, and I wonder why. But when if you look at some of the stuff that's happening now on Instagram, for example, I think what you're starting to see is a reinvention in some ways of personal training. A lot of this is through the digital format, but what I think they seem to be doing that some of the gyms haven't probably tapped into is that there's this sort of hyper personalization where they're really sort of I'm getting stuff that's for a guy and all of the challenges that guys are facing. And the one I saw last night was there was this fairly clearly successful trainer, and he was going after executives that wanted to look great in the boardroom, wanted to have energy as an entrepreneur, wanted to sort of continue to be
You
sort of
guys
a
are his poster children for that.
I
yeah,
love
well,
that the algorithm Matthew is targeting you for that. I just love that.
it,
It's
you know,
working. The algorithms are working.
Yeah.
you wanted to sort of look attractive, girlfriends, wives, or whatever it was you were trying to sort of attract, but it was super targeted, and the whole language and the videos and the sort of the post on the page. Really, I wouldn't have gone for it, but I was actually, I clicked on it, I started to follow because it got my interest, and
Yep.
I think the challenge with gyms, some of these big gyms that have always been successful in personal training, is that they're trying to sort of tell a story to so many different people, men and women for a start, totally different. And then you break that down into, well, where did those come from? You break that down into sort of different age groups, and women with children, women without children. Like there's so many different demographics and people at so many different stages of life that would be interested in personal training. I think that's the challenge, and I think you're probably going to get more of these specialized companies that are going to do a really good job, and they're probably going to be able to charge a much higher price because they really sort of niche down on a particular demographic. That's kind of my view on the situation. But I think what Crunch has done is a great idea, and certainly got a lot of respect for the campaign that put forward.
That's what we see works exactly that on the content side, is going after these niche audiences, speaking directly to them. So instead of saying you should do strength training, which is good for everybody, it's like if you're on GLP-1s, then it's good for you. If you're going through menopause, it's good for you, right? Like, and going to those audiences, as opposed to just saying strength training is good, which it is good for everybody, but talking about the thing they're going through. I think speaking to those audiences definitely having an impact in getting people to sign up that wouldn't otherwise be interested in strength training, for instance, in the case of menopause. So I think that's definitely working. The other thing I think you touched on is, I mean, if you do the same thing every day, you're going to get the same result. So we're staying at 15%. And it's like, I think things have to change. Now we have a lot of other tools like technology. So one of the things, most of the gyms have an onboarding process that includes a health assessment, a scan, one free private training session. They all offer this. And when they do that, the retention of those members is much higher, but the uptake is only 15%, right? That end up doing these training sessions. And so I think, is there a way to offer that in a digital capacity where they can do the body scan and health assessment from their phone at home? And then when they get those results and you're like, now what? You can click on it and ask to speak to a trainer. So I think there's ways that gyms now need to start thinking about integrating that onboarding experience through their phone. Once people aren't ready to do it, getting them to do it, and then hitting those people again, because once you get that information, then you don't know how to take the next step. So I think there's a big opportunity for gyms to utilize digital in increasing those numbers.
Well, next, I saw an interesting article on Fit Insider about the boom of Pilates. So I feel like we talk about Pilates almost every
Oh my God,
episode,
every day.
and there is like no stop to Pilates, right? So let's just talk about one of the fastest growing segments in fitness, in boutique fitness. I think I would say in fitness in general, called which is Pilates. We actually had Michael Ramsey on from Strong Pilates in last week's episode, which came out fantastic. But here's some numbers. Club Pilates is now Exponential's largest brand because they divested from Stride and Row House and
Cycle.
Rumble
Mhm.
and Cycle Bar too. Yeah, thanks for that. So they have over 1,000 studios, Club Pilates studios worldwide. ClassPass reported an 80% year over year growth in Pilates bookings in 2024, and it's continuing. It's actually trending the same direction this year. Then you've got the hybrids that we talked about, Strong Pilates, which blends reformer with cardio. So overall, the Pilates and yoga studio market is projected to hit 384 billion by 2030. So it is blowing up across all demos.
My
Gen
80-year-old
Z,
father is doing Pilates.
I was going to say older consumers, because
Totally.
it has like it's low impact, it's effective, it addresses longevity. So I think that's what makes it fascinating to see. I've gotten into Pilates. We've got Matthew. We've got to get you. You've never done Pilates, so I think we've got
I'd
to
like to be there for your first
get
class if you
you.
don't mind.
We should do it.
Yeah, we should
do it
definitely do it.
Yeah.
because it's accessible. I guess the question for you. I'll start with you, Lauren. Is can this hyper growth continue? Are we heading for oversaturation, like we've seen with cycling or others? Do you think it's going to stay hot, or is this like a trend that's going to fade it off?
I think, the fitness industry goes through a lot of cycles. One of the ways that we're thinking about it as Echelon is like actually creating a foldable reformer so gyms are buying reformers, those machines are huge. When and if this trend, will evolve in some regard, what are they going to do with those giant machines, and how do they, keep evolving? Club Pilates actually has a class that's reformer, TRX, and off of it too. So they're iterating in ways where it's still highly centered around the reformer, but they're iterating those classes. So I think from the equipment side, that's how we're thinking about it. But I do think the point you brought up, Mo, is that because I wear a wearable, and all of us do, we wear them all. And so I think my wearable is basically telling me I'm overstraining myself. It wants me to chill out. It's like ratcheting down my activity goal the minute after I get back from the gym. And so I think for me, that's been pretty eye-opening that those workouts are really not what I need. I need to actually slow myself down and do different kind of workouts. It's rewarding me for that. So because I'm hyper aware of that, I do think that even if the trends change, and they will because they always do, I think there is now that we're seeing that type of data, I think people are going to gravitate to things that, that's giving it positive feedback to. And for me, that's doing more low impact, like low key workouts, as opposed to, the things I was doing before, which was, brutalizing myself. So I know Mo works out pretty hard still. So I would say our wearables probably giving us the same feedback if I had to take a guess, and then Matthew, all of us.
If you've been around, as in the industry for quite a while, like as you said, Lauren, these trends come, they peak, they level out, and in some cases they decrease. They don't always go away. We've been talking. You've seen. I've probably in my time in the career have seen group cycling peak like 3 times and crash after every one. But I think it's naive to assume that this will continue to grow. And I think what what people, whether they're manufacturers of equipment or technology or bricks and mortar locations, is it's really just understanding where we are on that curve in each market, and just making sure that there's an awareness that things don't go up forever, and figuring out how to time investment, how to understand when the market's going to consolidate, and how to position yourself to deal with the inevitable leveling off, and to ensure that it doesn't take you out. Because I think it it's even like the stock market. Most people jump in when everybody's talking about it, and that's probably the worst time to get into the market. You probably know that better than anyone, Lauren, from what you used to do.
Totally.
I think it's just sort of I'd love to be able to look at some of the data that comes out there and who's behind it and who's sort of hyping the story. But it'd be great to sort of figure out on all these different trends that we speak about a long time. Exactly on that curve, where are we in terms of the average sort of life cycle of the business, and when do we need to be really careful about sort of waiting until the inevitable happens and then jumping back in when there's opportunities.
Shifting to our last story here, and this is pretty big news, Matthew. We've been talking about these ring wars now for I think a long time. We both have Oura rings on,
Yep.
so this is pretty big news in that Oura just scored a major legal win against Ultrahuman, who I'm also friends with, and Rincon, by the U.S. International Trade Commission. So they ruled that both Ultrahuman and Rincon infringe an Aura's patent, things like a curved battery design, integrated sensors, and the ring form factor. So here's the big news. As a result of this, Ultrahuman's Ring Air and Rincon are banned from being imported into the US after October 2025. So it essentially has completely sidelined two of Aura's competitors in its biggest market. And the
Wow.
case also got a little bit messy. Ultrahuman was called out for falsified evidence, claiming that they had a Texas factory to build rings in the US when they apparently did not. And the impact is pretty large. So Oura sold about 2.5 million rings, raised $350 million, valued at $2.5 billion. I think that's going to go up. Actually, I think as the last one, they might be at $5 billion with the Dexcom investment. They currently control almost 70% of the smart ring market, which is projected to be nearly $1 billion by 2030. So there's a big reason for everyone being heavily invested in this. And with Ultrahuman and Rincon and potentially others sidelined, I think at least the Samsung Ring, maybe is a competitor, sort of, but I haven't seen much around that. One thing for me is that this case is really highlighted, and I always stress on this, is the power of IP. I always think about IP, IP, IP. And on one hand, it protects innovators and people that come up with the original design. On the other hand, fewer competitors in here could mean you could command higher margins and you could slow down innovation, which might not always be a good thing. But again, this is why we have laws and rules. But it's not over. Ultrahuman filed a countersuit in India. So this thing is only going to be notched up another level, claiming that Oura copied their women's health and glucose features and calling Aura's subscription model anti-consumer. This is just like get messier and messier. So the fight is now global, but I think Aura is going to celebrate this victory. So, Lauren, I want to start with you as someone who's built tech in this space. Just would be curious to get your thoughts. I mean, do you think Aura's win cements its dominance, or do you think it validates, the ring modality?
I think it validates the ring modality, obviously, and they have a big leg up. I think these battles often become expensive and the lawyers win big in the end. And so, that they have a lot of money, but I think at the end of the day, they have a big leg up. They have really innovated in these communities. I think it is important to get these things, but at times it can become a distraction because they do have that momentum and they are the leader. So, I could kind of make a play for both of those things. But I do think tracking of data and all of these things, people that I'm friends with that don't work out, they're interested in these types of things. I have friends that are using it because they're trying to get pregnant and they're not trying to use birth control, and they're using it for all these different reasons. And as a result of wearing the ring for other reasons, they're now fascinated by working out. They're seeing their movement goals. And so I think for the industry, it's a really beneficial thing. And I think it's getting to more consumers than the person that's going to wear a Garmin or wear a watch and interested in tracking their workout. So I do think that these things have a net positive effect for the overall industry for sure.
From my perspective, I saw this Superhuman product. I know, Mo, you're connected with them, so I don't want to offend any of your colleagues or anything there. But when I saw the product at CES, I remember talking to the guy. I think one of them was an Indian guy, and I think they from what I remember at the time, they seemed to get quite a lot of traction in India before they did in America. But for me, if you're leading an organization, like you clearly raise companies that are in this position would have raised a lot of money, that have had some really good lawyers, patent lawyers that have looked at the IP of Oura. And my perspective is that I think they took quite a risk, and they probably hoped that they would go through it was inevitable that there was going to be some form of litigation. And my guess is that they'd probably hoped that through litigation, they would have been able to sort of make this work. But I still think it was a very bold move to go after Oura. Probably a little bit naive to think that they could have probably won if they really did their due diligence, and maybe not advisable if you are going to develop a company to think of a strategy where you're going to go up against somebody like that. So yeah, for me, I kind of felt as I saw that coming. I think congratulations to Oura. I think they deserve to have sort of won that position. And I would just be curious to speak to people at Superhuman, behind the scenes, Ultrahuman, sorry, if they were sort of honest about what their real strategy was, because this clearly wasn't an accident that they didn't know about it.
We should try to get them on.
I think there's a good business case in this, and certainly for smaller companies like all of us, where you're going into new markets, you see an opportunity. Mo, you and I have talked about these sort of sports rings, and I'm sure there's lots of gaps in the market that Oura aren't in, but they've almost gone straight head to head with these guys and lost.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm always a fan of competition as well, and I'm
Totally.
hoping that this does not stifle innovation. But look, I think on the wearable category, we're going to see things in your ear, things that will be, on your arm. I mean, there's going to be so much innovation to happen that I think we're going to be okay. All right, we're at time. Lauren, one of the things that I know you are a listener, but one of the things that we like to do to end the episode is just to do a final takeaway. So I want to start with you. Do you have any key takeaways from what we spoke about this week?
For me, the takeaway that I've been just feeling as I've been having conversations with businesses is really just focusing on how you're going to integrate all this technology into your ecosystem, how you're going to charge members for that experience, and think about, having an app and having all these different things is a whole different business model. And if you don't price things properly and put value to it, then I think you end up struggling to succeed in that. So I think thinking about pricing for all of these valuable assets that are now out there, whether it's integrating wearables, offering different types of software to your members' health assessments, and how that business model is going to look. I think that's the most important thing to think about. And maybe that isn't including everything into one bundled price. That's something I think about a lot.
No, I would appreciate that. Matthew.
We've covered a lot. It's been an interesting conversation, Lauren, and thank you for joining us and stimulating our little brain cells. But I think all I can probably comment on is maybe the last story, which is fresh in my mind, because that's kind of stuck with me a little bit. And I think I think in general in business, you sort of look at what a lot of people are doing, and you look at what a lot of big brands are doing, and in some cases they provide inspiration and motivation and direction. But in a lot of cases, just because they're a big company and they've been successful and raised a lot of money, it doesn't always mean that they really know what they're doing. And probably caution before sort of following some of these big trends, because maybe they've not got it right, and maybe you have. What
I
are
want
you,
to
what's
know,
your take?
Matthew, if you signed up for that influencer ad that you got, did they get you at the end of the day? Are you doing the corporate?
I registered for the page. I've not signed up for the personal training thing, but I may do. I may do.
Okay, I felt like you kind of hooked you, so that's worked. I think that's evidence right there that targeted marketing is something that everyone should focus on.
Well, I think for me, for the second week in a row, I'm going to pick a topic that we did not talk about today. But you all know that I love geeking out on research and data and looking at data that like no one really looks at just because I don't know. That's the way, honestly, it puts me to sleep too. So it's what I do at night. So I came across this data, which I've been following since I've had Sweatworks for about 14 years. But there's this survey that we do every year called the American Time and Use Survey. It's publicly available, ATUS. Anyone can go look it up, and I encourage you to do so. But something really interesting happened in this year's survey, and the data is really compelling. So, for the first time in decades, and let me take a step back, everyone, and we all travel internationally, thinks that America is the fattest country on earth. Okay, well, that is still true. We have the highest obesity rates in the world. However, we are not increasing our rates of obesity now. So, for the first time in decades, our obesity rates have actually gone down and they're showing decline, which is incredible. So, this American Time and Use Survey
Is that
reported.
because of GLP-1 then, do you think?
I think that's a part of
Or
it.
once you hit 100, it has to only go.
Well, I'm going to give you some
down.
interesting facts here. So Americans, and I did a LinkedIn post about this as well. Americans now spend 32 minutes per day on exercise, which is up from 20 minutes a day in 2003.
It's a big difference.
Income, which is interesting, still matters. As our average income goes up, higher income Americans are 3 times more likely to exercise than low income groups. So we still need to fix that. And encouragingly, and this is something we all know, that nearly 40% of new club members today are Gen Z and millennials. So here's what all this is important. I believe that we are entering what I'll just frame as our Starbucks moment, in that, like coffee is a daily ritual for most Americans. Like I wake up in the morning, first thing I have is my cup of coffee. I think like both of you. Um, I think fitness is starting to become a default behavior, like coffee. And for the first time in decades, we're seeing data actually back that up. So I think this boom that we're seeing in fitness in America isn't temporary. It's really a foundation for long-term change. So I'm just excited about it. I encourage you, to go either look at my post or pull up the report. But this is an incredibly exciting time to be part of this industry, because it's not just us preaching to the same people over and over again, but we're actually seeing growth happen.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to put that data into something like ChatGPT and then try and understand the amount of Americans that are on GLP-1s compared to that same period, and sort of see if you could merge the data in. Like maybe that's a little thing for you to see next week.
I'll send you the link. I mean, that would be interesting. We should go look at that.
I think Mo, I think what you touched on is that it's moving from a luxury to something that people see as something that they have to do. Like the fact my parents, who are immigrants, who thought I was crazy for working out, joined Stretch Lab, go to private Pilates trainers, like, they're just starting this habit now. They realize it's not just something that people with a lot of time and money do, but it's something that, and they're amazed. They're like, I'm getting stronger. My mom said she now uses a cowbell. I'm like, do you mean a kettlebell? But I think that's showing, like, it's like, even at their age, they're still learning that they're realizing that this is something they need to do. And I think young people, that's getting engraved in. So I think that is a major shift that will only continue to open the market. And I don't think that's just a trend. I think that's here to stay for sure.
Completely off topic, but the cowbell, Lauren, you and I grew up in the New York area. Do you remember that song from back in the day? Totally. That's got to be our outtake song for this one. See if you could find that and loop that in somehow.
Exactly. She does squats with the cowbell. I was like, this is why I love you.
That's
still just learning.
Well, that's it. Thank you very much, Lauren, for joining us this week. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't, and share it with 1 or 2 other people. Thanks very much for listening.